The Police Narcissist, Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. In Part 1, I explained why police forces attract our kind. Now I'm going to provide you with an example where an evident narcissist was at work, whilst also touching on the way that that person's actions affect and taint other individuals, and also how non-narcissists also get drawn into the behaviours. It comes from an article in the Times newspaper written by David Collins and Hannah Al-Othman, which states how a dead officer's iPhone exposes misogyny, corruption and racism in a police force. Now, I make it clear, of course, that there are many officers that do not engage in those practices, but there are those that do. Not all those that do are narcissists. Often, there will be normal individuals whose emotional empathy has been eroded, causing them to engage in the aforesaid misogyny, corruption, and racism. But amongst all of that, you will regularly find our kind, if you like, almost as the true believers in such conduct. It's not that they necessarily go in there thinking, I am going to be a misogynist, and I'm going to be corrupt, and I'm going to be a racist, but rather the narcissism propels those behaviours. Non-narcissists can be racist and misogynists also, for reasons that I've just explained. However, invariably, narcissists will engage in such behaviour and tend to be drivers of it, affecting other people, not only in terms of being victims of such racist and misogynist behaviour, but also tainting the attitudes of the people as a consequence of a herd mentality. Let's dive in and learn more. Shortly before midnight on a winter's day in 2020, Ricky Jones, a retired police officer, jumped to his death from the Prince of Wales Bridge spanning the River Severn. Jones, 52, left behind his wife, Sharon, and 3 daughters. He spent 26 years as a police officer, most of it for Gwent Police. To the outside world, Jones was a respected former copper and family man, facade, but behind closed doors, he subjected his family to decades of domestic abuse. As I mentioned in Part 1, for certain narcissists, the police force is an excellent cover as maintaining to the outside world, being an upstanding citizen, upholding the law and protecting members of the community. But behind closed doors, meting out abusive behaviours to an intimate partner primary source and non-intimate secondary source family members. After his death, Jones's eldest daughter looked through his iPhone, hoping to get some insight into her father's cruelty. Truth seeker trait, trying to seek answers. The phone exposed one of the most toxic police cultures in the United Kingdom. WhatsApp and Facebook messages show Gwent police officers openly discussing the sexual harassment of junior female colleagues, racist, homophobic and misogynistic abuse, the leaking of sensitive police material, and corruption. All of those behaviours, of course, are ones that have an absence of emotional empathy and would either be committed by the nose-down normals, whose emotional empathy is limited for other individuals or non-existent, or eroded as a consequence of other factors, and, of course, narcissists who had no emotional empathy to begin with. In September, 2 Gwent police chiefs were dismissed for gross misconduct after a junior female officer was groped at a party for the outgoing chief constable in 2019. A third would have been dismissed had he still been a serving officer. But Jones's mobile phone reveals such behaviour to be the tip of the iceberg for a force of 1,300 officers covering an area of 600 square miles of South East Wales. Jones and his former colleagues regularly shared pornographic videos and images of naked women, absence of emotional empathy, triangulation. The Sunday Times tracked down several former female officers. "We call it the Boys' Club," said one. "It's like a mob mentality. People say the police are racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Gwent police tick every box." Perhaps the most offensive exchanges were sent to Jones by a retired sergeant we are calling Officer A, who spent 30 years in the force and will receive a large police pension. Officer A messaged Jones about a mutual friend, a traffic cop, caught having sex with another officer while on duty. He has been shagging on duty, and it's been recorded on his Tetra, police radio. Mate, he wrote, didn't he learn anything from me at all? I thought I taught him well and how not to get caught. In 2018 and 2019, Officer A sent a number of racist images to Jones, mostly about Muslim women. A picture of Grenfell Tower on fire is titled The Great Muslim Bake-Off. In May 2019, Officer A sent Jones a racist image about the new royal baby. In another exchange on Facebook Messenger, Jones is discussing a possible divorce. Officer A offered him help in carrying out a possible fraud, saying he had done the same in the past for a Gwent police officer. Misappropriation of assets, commission of fraud, lack of accountability, absence of emotional empathy. I didn't realise things were so bad, Officer A wrote in December 2019. If you need to hide some money, I will look after it or open an account for you in my name if you want. I did it for, name of senior Gwent police officer. Hiding money from a partner during divorce is fraud and can be punishable by a custodial sentence. Jones shared regular messages with his friend Clark Joslin, who served in the Gwent Force for 26 years and carried out public order training with new recruits. In November 2018, at a misconduct hearing, female officers gave evidence of domineering, controlling, and physically abusive behaviour by Joslin, then aged 46. He resigned from the police before the hearing was completed, assertion of control by withdrawal, but the panel determined that he would have been dismissed. 6 months before the hearing, Joslin had messaged Jones, saying he was unaware of an internal report that said as many as 10 women had made complaints about his behaviour towards them. Shows a systemic pattern of behaviour, demonstrating a lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, manipulative behaviours, and absence of emotional empathy. A former partner reported Joslin to Gwent Police in 2012, and he was issued with a harassment warning, but he was allowed to remain a serving officer even after breaching the order. Lack of accountability, criminality. Former police officer Sarah was 20 when she got involved in a relationship with Joslin. The Sunday Times made contact with her via the Centre for Women's Justice, who had represented her when she successfully sued Gwent Police. In one of the most serious domestic incidents, Sarah was having a bath while he cooked dinner, but he became angry, saying she allowed the food to go cold. Threat to control. He was shouting at me. Ignition of heated fury, she said. He'd been cutting potatoes for dinner, and he was still holding the knife. He held me up against the wall, and he had the knife at my shoulder. Afterwards, she said Joslin told her, who are they going to believe? Me, who's got years of service, or you, who's just started? Assertion of control through intimidation. One night, she told Joslin she was leaving him. Threat to control. He grabbed me and threw me onto the bed, and he's a big bloke. Physical violence. Preventative Hoover. Joslin put his hand around her throat, she claimed. He wasn't trying to stop me from breathing, she said, but he was trying to control what I did with my head. He was red and angry, and he was near my face, and he was holding my face. Assertion of control through physical violence to try and nullify threat to control posed by her leaving the relationship. Sarah reported him, and police later dismissed her on a data protection breach, which, of course, goes to show the extent to which there is the protection of particular officers with regard to their behaviour, it would suggest. Gwent Police arrested her at home in front of her neighbours and searched her house. She was never charged. She said women who came forward to make complaints at Gwent Police were discredited by the management. They're made out to be either liars or mental. Blame-shifting, smearing, she said. Anything so they don't have to be believed. Along with a second female officer, who was also abused by Joslin, pattern of behaviour, she received an apology and payout from the force in November last year. Joslin offered no comment when asked about his conduct and phone messages with Jones, assertion of control by staying in a position of withdrawal. Sarah claimed Joslin used to boast about being protected by officers high up in the force. Boasting behaviour, lack of emotional empathy, obvious behaviours. Jones was close friends with a senior officer at Gwent Police, a chief inspector, Officer D. Officer D had sensitive information about an officer who had been suspended after groping a junior female colleague on a work night out. He was happy to leak it to his friend. Officer D wrote, officer's nickname, has inappropriately touched a female probationer on a night out. Poor boundary recognition, lack of emotional empathy. She's complained and they moved him into the FCR, force control room, only to find out that he has been stalking one of the young operators for months. Harassment, hoovering, assertion of control, absence of emotional empathy. Whilst in the FCR, he was inappropriate to another young operator. And when they did some digging, there was a pattern of him, in the words of PSD, Professional Standards Department, grooming young girls for sexual purposes. I think he will be sacked. Repeated pattern of behaviour showing inaccountability, lack of, sense of entitlement, manipulation for the purposes of sex. Officer D added, one of the girls is on my shift and she said he was really pushy. It will be a public hearing, mate, and they will publicly sack him. He's identified weaknesses in young girls and exploited them. Exploitation, use of vulnerability against colleagues, breach of trust, exploitation of power. There was no public hearing. A misconduct panel never went ahead, and the officer has since left the force. There are disputed accounts as to why the panel never happened. Josie, another victim who the Sunday Times spoke to, said she was dismissed from the force after making a complaint of sexual assault against that same officer. Like Jocelyn's victim, she claimed she was dismissed from the force on spurious allegations. This time, the reason given was failing to present a statement to a suspect during an interview. They were clutching at every straw that they could to get me out, she said. It was one word against another, and they were friends with the guy who assaulted me. They decided to sack me, based on the balance of probability that I knew about that statement. All they wanted was to discredit me for this hearing. Soon after she joined the force, she was told by a male colleague if she sucked people off, she would move quickly through the ranks. I was never ever going to do that, she said. On one occasion, as a probationer, she was taken into a room by a sergeant who shut all the blinds. He asked her what she did in her spare time, and she said she was a musician. You must like performing then. Have you ever given a sergeant a blowjob? He asked her. Poor boundary recognition, manipulation. She refused and left the room. He later told her, Are you sure about that blowjob? Because I've got a van here with a mattress in the back. Harassment, assertion of control, repeated behaviours. She said misogyny and sexual harassment were rife in Gwent. It goes through the force. The boys think it's all right to slap your ass as you're walking around. Lack of boundary recognition. She said it's the norm within that place. Oh, it's just banter. It's just having fun. Now, the point is that not every individual that will be engaging in these behaviours will be a narcissist. What you see here is that certain individuals that have been mentioned with regard to their systemic and repeat behaviours show a pattern that support all of the narcissistic indicators that they are narcissists. But their behaviour creates a culture whereby they make it seemingly acceptable for other people to treat colleagues in a similar way. And therefore, normal individuals following a herd mentality, which can erode emotional empathy, engage in those boundary transgressions also, even though they are not narcissists. Returning to the article. On one occasion, she said, male officers taped her phone to the ceiling telling her, "We're going to watch your arse when you climb on the table." Belittlement. She said they were just wholly inappropriate. They stuck loads of naked women to the inside of my locker. Belittlement. In another case, ex-Gwent officer Rachel, who the Sunday Times contacted with the help of another officer, said that women who spoke out against senior officers were dismissed to keep them quiet. Nullification of threat to control. It left me suicidal, she said. I was pretty much bankrupt. I was left homeless and sofa surfing with my child. I lost my car. I lost everything. It's like an old schoolboys club. They keep everything in-house. It's just quite toxic. And it's a small force, so they manage to hide things really well. When she put in a formal complaint about a colleague, she was told by a senior officer, "You're an attractive woman. You know what you can get, what you want, if you use that." Belittlement. Sensitive information about misconduct and corruption investigations was regularly exchanged between Jones and a number of officers. In October 2017, an officer also shared footage of an arrest, which may be considered by the force to be the improper disclosure of information and a data security breach, lack of accountability. A Gwent traffic cop, Officer E, sent Jones the dashcam footage of a car chase, which ended in a driver stopping the car, getting out of the door and running down a dark street in Chepstow. 2 officers could be seen chasing after him in uniform and high-vis jacket. Then the officers appear to accidentally trip each other up during the arrest of the suspect. The location, date and time of the incident can be seen on the video. For fuck's sake, what a pair of plonkers, Chuckle Brothers, Jones wrote about his former colleagues after receiving the video. By then, he had retired from Gwent Police Force. Officer E replied, "Haha, I know, it's like you've been framed, isn't it?" Officer E also sent a number of misogynistic messages about women. He sends a screenshot of an online dating application that reads, "Your application to join our matchmaking service has been rejected. You failed question 14. What do you like most in a woman? My dick," was not an acceptable answer. He also sent a photoshopped image of Theresa May on the front bench of the Commons carrying out a sex act on Philip Hammond, and an image of a white man and a white woman holding a black baby with the caption, "You need to start asking questions, Dave." Jones was in a WhatsApp group made up of 8 serving and retired officers, initially set up to organise a lads' trip to Europe. Officers A, C and E were part of the group. Chats featured homophobic and racist banter between its members. Invalidation, belittlement, lack of emotional empathy, smearing. At one point, Officer C mentioned having problems with his WhatsApp. Officer A responded, "Overloaded your computer with gay porn, did you, mate?" Officer C wrote back, "I don't know why you keep sending it to me. I told you I'm not into all that." Officer A then sent him a clip of Mr. Chow, an Asian character from the movie The Hangover, waving at the camera saying, "So long, gay boys." Officer C then posted an image of a naked man bent over in a garden. In the same group, officers called each other puffs and PC closet. Another group member used the word slopes to describe Asian people. Humiliation, smearing. Jones's funeral took place at St. Cadoc's Church in Trewethen in February 2020. Being married to him was like being trapped inside a living hell, said his wife Sharon, 55, who worked as a ward nurse in the NHS. His father was Lewis Jones, once Deputy Labour leader of Torfaen Council, and his family had close ties to the political establishment in South East Wales. The funeral was attended by Nick Thomas Symonds, now the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade, Lynn Neagle, now the Deputy Minister for Mental Health and Wellbeing in the Welsh Parliament, and Pam Kelly, Chief Constable of Gwent Police. Jones knew where many of Gwent Police skeletons were buried, but it wasn't until his death that his own began to emerge. He met his future wife Sharon in the Horse and Jockey pub in Pontypool in 1987, aged 19. As a young man, Jones had a tendency to bully and control those around him, his family said. Bullying behaviour, intimidation, assertion of control. He was once found by the police near cliffs around Cardiff, having had suicidal thoughts. The pair married in 1992 and bought a large detached house in a quiet village tucked into the Welsh valleys. They had 3 daughters. But Jones's mental state was deteriorating, making his need to control and bully even worse. His family said he developed a disturbing obsession that he was allergic to his middle child, who suffered from eczema. He said to her that she couldn't go near him because he was allergic to her hair and was concerned about her skin particles in the air and on the furniture, Sharon said. Paranoia, nullification of threat to control, absence of emotional empathy. He had an obsession with hygiene and cleanliness, and the idea that me and the children were somehow dirty, smearing, belittlement, invalidation. Also watched the video The Narcissist and Cleanliness. He said his children stank, insult. He said their breath was smelly and we were all overweight, delusion, insult. He once told one of my daughters he was going to charge her per slice of bread from the loaf. Sharon and the children would have to vacuum the house from top to bottom 3 times a day to keep him happy. He would demand his children use only 2 pieces of lavatory paper, and when the children were younger, he would make them live in one room to keep the rest of the house clean. Bullying, absence of emotional empathy. Breaking those rules would mean verbal abuse, but he was never physical. Looking back, I think he probably did have an OCD mental health problem, said his eldest daughter Emma, 28. And actually, it isn't. It's narcissism. But of course, again, this individual isn't aware of what that might be and ascribes the behaviour to something else. Jones worked in police stations in Abertillery Town and Newport Central, in armed response and finally as a traffic cop. He was a trained tutor constable, a road death scene manager and an anti-terrorism search officer. The couple became estranged. His wife slept on the sofa for 15 years while Jones had the bedroom. Sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy. But not once did she suspect him of cheating. He used to say, "I'm an honourable person and you're a bad person." Insult, belittlement, she said. He would say that on a daily basis. It was nasty and malicious, and after many years, I started to believe him. Gaslighting. He would get all dolled up in his aftershave and say he was going out with his mates in Cardiff. I believed him. But Emma's detective work on her father's phone uncovered evidence of at least 2 extramarital affairs, having an affair, infidelity, and a number of flirtations. One lasted 8 years, ending 6 months before his death, with Jones threatening the woman, use of threat, a mother of 2. You see, in times of negativity, many men would do what they could to hurt in search of vengeance. As you know, I am not like that. Delusion, he wrote in October 2019. He made a list of items he had bought her, triangulation, bringing up the past, saying he wanted them back, valuing them at £9,000. This included a £50 steam iron, an £8 Cure CD, a £45 electric neck massager, and a £60 pair of Wellington boots. Sexual infidelity and also financial infidelity. Emma also found her father had been secretly recording rows with her mother. He had 365 arguments on his mobile phone. Argumentative behaviour. Emma noticed the recordings usually started halfway through the argument. Looking back, I can see he would wind Mum up, leave the room, then come in and start talking to her in a calm sort of voice. Revision of history. Emma said by then Mam was so wound up and shouting, he was recording it to make it sound as if Mam was the abuser, but it was the other way around. He was clever like that. Of course, his narcissism was causing him to do that in the moment, in effect, editing the circumstances in the way that the narcissism edits the truth. Also, on the phone were dozens of pictures Jones had taken of his youngest daughter's bedroom to show how dirty she was. Humiliation, belittlement. When she was 14, he would take images of her used sanitary products and send them to one of his secret girlfriends. Triangulation. This still affects his daughter emotionally, as his children were constantly made to feel dirty. Sharon believes the recordings and the photographs were all part of a plan to humiliate her. His final words were to me the night he walked out of the house and jumped off the bridge were, "I'm going to publicly humiliate you," Sharon said. And you know what? That's exactly what he did. Sharon last saw Jones on Sunday, January the 5th, 2020. At 3 p.m, they had a row about taking down the Christmas decorations, and he walked out of the house. Assertion of control by withdrawal. Jones had made preparations. As a police officer, he knew the inquest process, and the family believe he made efforts to distribute malicious evidence about his wife around the community. Smearing. They believe he told their GP she had anger issues. Smearing, triangulation, knowing the doctor might be called as an inquest witness. He emailed secret recordings of his rows with Sharon to a relative. He spread the word among colleagues and neighbours that Sharon was an alcoholic. Smearing. His daughters, aged 28, 26 and 18, say this was completely false. Jones, they say, was an abuser. This is backed up by evidence on the phone. He joked with friends about murdering Sharon with shovel hands. He complained about her not working enough shifts at the hospital, largely because he needed £800 per month handouts from her to fund his affairs. Financial infidelity, pity play, and threat. Phone messages show how him calling Sharon a fucking bitch and a drunken witch, portraying her as an evil mother who had brainwashed their children. Smearing. Sharon considered going to the police about the domestic abuse she suffered, but who do you go to? He was the police. I felt like there was no one who would listen. There is evidence on the phone that Jones had already made preparations for a police complaint. Going to the police was an ordeal, he messaged one friend in 2018. It had to be done to protect myself, as I can assure you that the law will always look initially on the side of the female. Despite being retired, he told a friend he would be able to access the internal police systems, breach of confidence, lack of accountability, to check if any family members had complained about him. His family described this process as grooming the police. They have also made a complaint to the Independent Office for Police Conduct about the police's alleged conduct towards them during the process of gathering evidence for Jones's inquest. Sharon claims she was told by an officer she was going to be taken to a police station under caution to provide a statement for her husband's inquest due to her supposed lack of cooperation. This was despite never having been asked for one, she said. The IOPC has referred the complaint back to Gwent Police, who in turn have handed it to Wiltshire Police. Last month, 2 senior Gwent police officers, Chief Superintendent Mark Budden and Chief Inspector Paul Staniforth, were sacked, and Chief Superintendent Mark Warrender retired before the outcome of a disciplinary hearing. The men were accused of having an inappropriate conversation with a more junior member of police staff, and Warrender was accused of inappropriate touching. Despite the public interest in reporting such a case, the hearing against the 3 men was held in private. Last year, PC Paul Chadwick, 51, was jailed for having inappropriate relationships with 2 women who met during the course of his duties. Gwent's police most recent inspection report by His Majesty Inspector of Constabulary and Fire Rescue Services found it requires improvement in the way it treated its workforce and the public. One female officer said the problem was that everyone knows everyone in South East Wales. In at least one case, a woman who was pushed out of Gwent Police after reporting senior officers won a payment from the force, but was made to sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing her from speaking out. Let me be abundantly clear. These alleged incidents of misogyny, racism and misconduct within Gwent Police are truly despicable and disgusting, Natasha Ashgar, Senedd member for South Wales East, said. Every appalling incident we hear of causes irreparable damage to the public's trust and confidence in our police forces. Jones's family have made arrangements to hand over his phone to Wiltshire Police and have asked them to investigate the messages found between Jones and the serving and retired officers, as well as how the family were treated by Gwent following his death. The investigation will be handled by the Professional Standards Department. Nazir Afzal, the former Chief Crown Prosecutor for the North West of England, has been supporting Jones's family and has serious concerns about Gwent Police. These are industrial levels of abuse, racism and potential corruption, he said. Given how this came to light by complete chance, clearly this leaves us with a terrible thought that this is prevalent everywhere. There needs to be a public inquiry into police culture nationally. It requires a wholesale root and branch approach. For Sharon and her 3 daughters, their view of the police has changed forever. They say the contents of Jones's phone have made them afraid of the police. Sharon is concerned about how many more women around the United Kingdom being abused in a relationship by a police officer. Where do these women go to be heard? She asked. The article makes it clear that the names of Ricky Jones's family members and female police officers have been changed. Whilst, of course, this targets a particular police force and what's going on there, it's evident that the behaviours of both Jones and Jocelyn, who form major parts of this investigation, are the behaviours of police narcissists for the indicators that I have detailed in the content of this video. This gives you an inside look in one instance of the behaviour of 2 narcissists and undoubtedly others, and it shows the impact that it has upon a family behind closed doors, and it also demonstrates the culture that is created by these true believer narcissists who engage in such behaviour, seeing nothing wrong with it, believing that it's justified, and how it impacts upon others by virtue of a herd mentality. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.